Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How to Do Drugs. I am your host, Aaliyah Janine, and today, all the way from the West Coast, I have Babe West with me. Hey, Babe, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great out here.
I bet. Yeah, no, it's fucking freezing here in New York right now. Mother Nature is very fickle. Like one day it was like 50 and then it dropped down to like 10 and then it was snowing. Like it started snowing and then 20 minutes later it just started raining. And then it just rained for the rest of the night. And then it was up 40 and now it's back down to like the mid 30s. So it's everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Sounds like y'all live in Oregon, actually.
Yeah. How is it? Is it well, because you guys have snow there, right? I'm
Absolutely. So we have the Cascades, and then I'm up in Portland, and people are like, it rains all the time there. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe kind of. I think you're thinking about Seattle.
Yeah,
They have
Seattle.
more rainy days and
Mhm.
gray, but Oregon weather, you even in the summer, pack a jacket, have a long sleeve, have a short sleeve. It's layers because you go inside, you come back out, and it's a different weather out there.
Yeah, it's I'm originally from Wisconsin, so it was always it could be summer in the morning or it'll be like really cold in the morning like spring and then it'd be summer and then it'd be winter at the night. Like it's so crazy and climate change and stuff, obviously. That has nothing to do with it.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. So yeah, so I always make sure I have at least 2 pairs of pants on when I go outside and 2 pairs of everything. It's crazy. So how is the wonderful state of Oregon? You guys were going through some stuff the past couple summers I saw.
Yeah, it's
Visiting.
always like you live in Portland and they're like Oregon or Maine and I'm like Oregon and they're like, "Oh, how are you? Are you safe?" And I'm from Texas originally. I got a Gigi who lived up in Chicago
Mhm.
back long before it got like nice like it is now. But so like I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't have any problems. So Portland's great. Oregon's always been, I mean, other than its history, has been a great state.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
moved up there 11 years ago this year, and to grow weed, but no,
Yeah.
I came up
Nice.
here, and I've just seen a lot of social advancement. The housing price, like I left the Bay Area, it's following the same kind of trends, but for
Mhm.
the most part, I love it. It's great food, great people.
Yeah.
Hotspot to everywhere. You can fly anywhere within like 2 hours. If
Yeah,
you wanna
yeah,
go
yeah.
up to Seattle, it's a 30-minute flight. You wanna go down to LA, it's like a 2-hour flight. Vegas, where I am right now, is like a 2-hour flight. So, I love it.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times doing shows and stuff like that, and it is convenient to get to and to get out of, which is really nice. What part of Texas did you used to live in? I used to live in Garland when I was younger.
Oh, well, I was born in Atascosa, so, county. I lived right outside of Bear County in Canyon Lake, so San Antonio area, a little
Mhm.
bit south. When I tell people that I grew up in a green, rolling hills, beautiful lakes and rivers, they're like, "In Texas?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And
They
they're
have
like,
it there.
"No." And I'm like, "Okay, you've either been to the Panhandle where it's flat or out to El Paso where it's desert, but I tell you,
Mhm.
it's gorgeous in Texas too." So
Yeah, no, Texas does have some it does have some really great areas. Driving through Texas though, which I have done, not fun. It's there's no rolling hills or grass. No, it is. I think it took me 8
wow.
hours. It took me 8 hours and at least a gram of coke to get through
I
all of
believe
Texas.
that.
All of Texas. Be like it's like driving through Indiana. It's like I whenever I go back home, because I like to drive, I bring my dog. I always make sure that I leave at a time so when I'm driving through Indiana, it's at night so I don't have to see the nothingness that is Indiana. But Texas is great. So tell me a little bit about yourself. So you're in the adult industry, correct? Which is
Yes, I
great.
am.
And you've been a dancer and you just started getting into like adult films or like fetish stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've done some fetish modeling on and off for over a decade. I ran a pretty successful Tumblr back in the day, and that's kind of how I got into that. And I've always had usually dudes going, "Hey, can I take your photo?" I'm a photographer.
Yeah, I love that.
Um, And I've done some contract work with like amateur sites over the last because whenever you need a quick like few $100, like, hey, I knew that this was available to
Mhm.
me. But actually coming into the porn industry, I started about, this will be my third year. I was working a job at a magazine, otherwise, quote unquote, successful.
Mhm.
And I was really tired of IT and tech. I was really tired of talking to like old white dudes and having them constantly tell me I was wrong and then being the one to fix the shit. So I I was in the server room one day and it was my first video I ever posted. I was like, okay, well, I've been showing my tits online here and there on and off for years. So what if I just like masturbated in the server room and no one was there, but people don't know that when you got the door open on the camera.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
like I
yeah.
just like sat it there and did the thing, did the deed. Was like, oh, that was fun. A little nerve wracking. And then I'm like, oh shit, I should probably clean this up because gross. And then I posted that shit on Pornhub and everybody like loved the fuck out of it. And I was like, okay, well, started doing just solo stuff, as it were. And then people started reaching out. I've been a sex worker in many capacities for years. So I'd already
Mhm.
had multiple Twitter accounts by that time, where I was connected with people in other aspects of sex work and went to the Exotica, the one and only that they hosted in Portland in 2019,
Mhm.
and met people. And I was fortunate enough to use those, really leverage those contacts during the pandemic. I had switched jobs by that time. I was in the brewing industry doing software implementation and building databases and all this really boring stuff in a
Oh,
really
I mean,
cool.
that's cool though. That's still I'm like, "That's cool. I like building stuff."
Oh, it was, but, like, you're working with C Corp companies that, like, they're running businesses and, like,
Yeah.
they're paying upfront all this freaking money, and, like, I was so much stress, for not enough money, and I was like, "I'm done with this." And sure
Mhm.
enough, they had let go basically my whole team other than one person, because brewing industry, like, they had to take all their, like, in-house stuff, they shut down. They had to either throw it back into bright tanks or, like, further bottle it, whatever they were gonna do. A
Mhm.
lot ended up, turning into sanitizer and all this stuff, and,
Oh.
people didn't want software as a service, so they were trying to get out of their contracts, and
Mhm.
so the company let us all go, gave us a decent severance, and then I was like, "Well, what am I going to do from here?"
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, what if you legitimize this whole thing and actually go for it?"
Mhm.
So I dove right in.
Good. Yeah, that's how it works. That's kind of how I did it too. I was like, I'm just going to make one movie and then I'm like, I really like it and then I ended up doing it for 4 years. To go back when you said of doing the solo stuff how it was like really nerve-wracking, like the first video I ever did, it was for the score group and it was like solo masturbation. And that was so like it was like I had more anxiety doing that than I did with my first scene performing with another person. Isn't that strange how that works out? It's like you do this all the time, but normally when you masturbate, like you are by yourself, or maybe you may have a partner with you or something like that. So it is I completely relate to that like weird,
I just want to
uncomfortable
make
thing.
clear, I do not like when I pleasure myself, I'm not like spread open, like in the angle, doing all the things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I'm in like in one position. I normally have my phone in my hand and
it's not what people want to necessarily watch on TV when they wanted to jerk off. So like,
yeah.
I definitely, it was more of a, I've always been an exhibitionist, but like that whole like
Mhm.
self pleasuring, and I've talked about this a few times. Like, it isn't just like touching yourself for the other person. It's,
Mhm.
you actually have to know your body and
Yeah.
get into it, and it's an intimate expose and you're literally the one under the microscope. So it's still to this day is when I'm doing solo stuff, I'm like, what do I do again?
I
Oh
know,
yeah.
right? Every time I had to film a solo scene for like the website that I had, I'm like, oh, this is gonna fucking suck today. Just have to because you don't get to do it the way that you want it to, you know what I mean? Like, because you are a performer, so you are making content for other people to see. Like if people don't want to see me masturbate like regular, like how I normally do it. Like it's like a dude, how they're just like all hunched over and stuff. It's like terrifying. Like it's not sexy. Like I'm
No,
doing this
when
for
you're
a
doing it for
purpose.
the pleasure, it's not exactly. And the same thing, I guess, like when you're having sex with others on camera, but usually if you have a videographer, they're moving
Mhm,
around angles, like people
mhm.
are giving you feedback while you go. I often
Lift
when I
her
have
leg up.
Yeah, and when I have somebody recording my solo stuff, they're more focused on getting close-ups and stuff. They're not directing me per se because
Yeah.
most people are like, yeah, you touch your body the way you're gonna touch it. And
Yeah. You got this. I believe in you. So you had said that that you moved to Oregon to grow weed, is that correct? Like do you grow weed cuz it's legal there? There's a bunch of shit legal there now.
well, I left the Bay Area, Santa Cruz,
Mhm.
and slowly made my way up north from Trinity and everything. And I was involved in a couple of grow co-ops where we put money in, and then like some people would be working the project, and then
Mhm.
we'd come back during harvest season. Like co-op share, like childcare, all these other resources. I was once very against Babylon. I was
Okay.
gonna live off the grid and all that, and then
Mhm.
eventually, it just wasn't really feasible for my lifestyle. My last grow was in 2017. I actually got
Okay.
I had a friend send me a picture because they were pulling out some of the shake and trim from 2017. It's like,
Mhm.
you guys still have that in buckets? Tell me you're not smoking it. And they're like,
Right? Oh.
only when we're out. And I'm like, oh, it was like Star Dog, and I don't even remember what my last. But yeah, we did that for 8 years, and then I had kids, so I was never there full time. I just like put
Mhm.
money and then
In
trimmed.
it. Yeah.
So, and honestly, up in Oregon, the way they're doing it, and I've kind of heard other states, it's turned into the business of weed,
Mhm.
and that kind of shifts the whole dynamic in who's growing, who's producing. And in Oregon, we can't buy from out of state, so all of our product has to be grown
In
and
state, yeah.
processed and made in state, which is kind of cool in a way when you're thinking
Yeah.
buy local and all that.
I do like that about Oregon, specifically and like especially because there are still so many people who are incarcerated for weed that are literally still in jail to this day, but they live in states who are now decriminalizing it. And Oregon has that thing where it's like I believe I read it. I believe it was Oregon where it's like, oh, if you were ever in jail for this, like I know they released a bunch of people and they were like the first people in line to like get a lot of jobs at like dispensaries and grows, which I think is great. And I think that that's really necessary because once old white men start getting into it and like it's in the
Uh,
stock market, you know what I mean? Then like I still buy from like I have a card here in New York, but I still buy from like my local dealers, you know? Like I have a problem. Like I don't want to end up buying Marlboro weed or like
you know,
or Newport weed or something like that. And I'm sure it will come to that. Hopefully I'm dead by then when it comes to that.
yeah, it is really crazy because when we first started growing, we were getting our clones from DJ Shorts,
Mhm.
and it was right as the medical clubs were coming into California, and then like there was all this new product we were creating. You know, edibles were still being made in your grandma's kitchen,
Yeah.
not in the factory, coming to you all cutely packaged. And
Mhm.
there were hella strains for sure, but even the potency, the flavor strains, it was a lot easier to keep in the talk of what was strain specific, and we weren't as nuanced. Like people were getting all their data from High Times and all
Yeah.
the events. Like
Mhm.
and now everybody's like a pot expert. Everybody knows somebody who's grown or has grown. And I you said marble weed. Like I'd
Yeah.
love to be able to go to the grocery store and just pick up my weed, but
Mhm.
you know, we go in and you can buy ounces for $40 now.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, yeah, it's like probably last year's harvest outside, but there's no seeds in it. It's not,
Mhm.
it's not, it hasn't been harmed or anything. Like it is crazy.
Yeah,
Cause
the quality of weed has definitely changed from when I was, like, in high school, and even in my 20s, I remember, buying weed that was, like, rolled up in oh, it also depended on where I got the weed, but there'd be a couple times it'd just be, like, a ball of fucking tin foil, and it just literally be sticks and stems, and seeds, and just dirt weed, basically, and, like, I remember, like, the weed that I would steal from my mom was just always, like, really shitty. And then I started seeing like the actual like nuggets, so, like real like little
yes,
nuggets. And I'm like, wait, that's what we and then you see the crystals and the smell of it. And I'm like, whoa. Like now, like my tolerance is obviously a lot higher than what it used to be when I was younger. But an eighth would last me a whole week. It would be like, yo, this stuff is really strong. And now I mean, I've cut down a bit. I'm on my robot weed. I live in a non-smoking building, so I can't really smoke in here. It is it's crazy how the potency of it, and now especially with edibles and stuff, because you have to look at the FDA. Um because like when we would make edibles, like one brownie would definitely be stronger than, than the other brownie because of mixing and stuff like that. And now they actually have to be like accurately, measured out, be like,
Yeah.
this is 100 milligrams, and or whatever it may be. Which is good, because I've definitely eaten some stuff that I didn't think was as strong, and then I'm just down for 15 hours.
Uh, yes, absolutely. And it is really cool the science of it.
Hmm.
I'm not really hip to the business of it because
Yeah.
ultimately, the more and more it goes, it's the people who already have money, power,
Yeah.
resources. Um,
Literally millions of dollars to
yeah,
even like
and
be able to sell it.
like I've been trying to buy a building in Portland forever, and I mean warehouses, you they're growing pot. They're growing pot, they're processing pot. I've
Hmm.
seen, and I think these machines and everything, yeah, sure, it's great. But those were also paid jobs. And I always think of the fact that Oregon, and I think maybe Rhode Island, there's one other state on the East Coast
Hmm.
that we have attendants that pump your gas. I haven't pumped gas in a decade, y'all. So I always travel with somebody when I'm on a road trip because I'm like, I don't do that.
That is hilarious. There's a couple we were in New Jersey. We went to a football game, and yeah, they had a gas station attendant. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? I'm like, there's this dude by your car, and they're like, he's pumping gas. And I'm like, what? They still have those? I didn't even know that they still exist.
It's Jersey. I knew it was one of those states over there in the upper
So some of them,
13.
yeah, like right, because it's like right off a highway kind of thing. So it's like they don't really want you to like get in and out of your car or whatever. I mean, yeah, that's great. I do like it when people do stuff for me.
I believe in those otherwise unnecessary jobs, like the people who check your receipt at the Costco or the Sam's Club or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
that's normally like an old dude, that, who's retired, who just like sometimes they actually are trying to like just survive, but sometimes it's just a dude who just needs to get out of the fucking house for a little bit, which is sweet. But yeah, it is one of those jobs that you're just like, they still have those. But I mean,
and so
oh, go ahead.
no, it was definitely going to hit the weed industry eventually, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people don't trim the way they used to, and
Hmm.
you don't. Growers aren't making the money that the brokers are now doing, and I think that's what every industry does. The salespeople, the people
Hmm.
pitching it and getting it in the places, tend to make more money, and then the people that own the businesses buying it and selling it are making the money. Like
Yeah.
it is insane, but
Do
no,
they do
Oregon's
they
doing. Oh, go ahead.
oh, do they have machines to like trim weed now instead of
Oh yeah,
really?
like, not as good,
Wow.
but yeah, like, definitely quick, and you're busting it out where it would be, like, people sitting, and it's
Like
basically.
the hippie girl, the white hippie girl with blonde dreadlocks, and she's like there for 3 hours. You know what I mean? I've seen.
Yep, and, like, she's got the wool on, and then she goes to the
Yeah,
grocery store, and she's got, like, little tiny pieces of nugget on her.
yeah, just
Um,
everywhere.
Oregon, at least with the laws, like, keeping all of our stuff local to the state, not bringing in exports and stuff like that,
Hmm.
it allows us to control, like, farm, like, we know the soil, we know all the data there,
Hmm.
and it gives a lot more insight to the quality of product.
Hmm.
Even if people are able to like cut out the workforce through modernization, I just think that's the way
Yeah.
to go. But some of the other things that Oregon's doing, because we really are spearheading things, is we did decriminalize, and we also have changed our expungement laws as of
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah. Talk about
Um,
that.
yeah, so with the expungement, now people can come in. There's no blocking period for multiple convictions. So basically, if you wanted to expunge something, you'd have to do it one at a time. You'd have to wait a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
And then, like, non-person class B felonies are eligible after 7 years instead of 20 years. So
Wow.
imagine your life. Like the whole point of incarceration supposedly is to take
Rehabilitate
people, yeah,
you.
take people out of society so they can like learn, like, have some type of penal penalty and then be eventually integrated back in, right? But that's not what happens. And we don't need to
No.
go into that. I'm not going to argue with that. Like I don't argue with people that are like, "Oh yeah, we do though." And I'm like, "Have you ever had a parole officer? Have you seen people go through hoops based on like attitude and like anyway, long story short,
Yeah.
we've gone ahead and removed that barrier. We're
Mhm.
definitely moving away, like nonviolent offenders on charges and stuff like that. There's this big movement, especially because we decriminalized, and it is different than legalization. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that like you legalize and then you can control it, right? And
Yeah.
like that means that if somebody wanted to shoot dope, they could go pick up dope and like shoot safe dope, which
Mhm.
is a solution, but
Yep.
um why would we want to solve fentanyl issues, right?
Right.
But what it does mean is that you're removing barriers from people's lives because, like, at the end of the day, everybody uses something, whether it's caffeine, TV, masturbation, what have you. I don't care. Like,
Mhm. Porn,
as
yeah, all
creatures,
of
we're
it.
hardwired for that addiction, and it's
Mhm.
actually survival that's from. And rather than creating multiple offenders or creating more barriers to people in housing, employment, and all these other things, we've determined that it's not worth our law enforcement's time, our taxpayers' money, our space in our prisons to focus on these things.
Mm.
So if you have personal use, which in most cases I think is under like a pound, like it varies from thing to thing, but if it's
Yeah.
definitely personal use, um then you're not going to go to prison for that.
Prison for it,
It's
yeah.
not the DA throwing everything they can stick at you, right?
Mhm.
And it also means that if like you get pulled over for a tail light and you got like a little baggie of coke or whatever on you, you're not going to go to jail and now be like out of your life for 30, 90, et cetera days.
Yeah.
And that is revolutionary. Like we need that change. And I
Mhm.
laugh because like we're not selling mushrooms in the pot shops yet, but we are doing a lot of stuff with ketamine and psilocybin therapies,
Mhm.
and we have been for over a decade through OSU, OHSU, all these colleges that we have out here. But
Mhm.
we're really able to pursue it, and there's like 3 companies I believe that recently got the patents and permits to produce pharmaceutical ketamine for therapy.
Okay.
Um, and everybody's like, ketamine, isn't that the thing that like, people
It's
go
a
into,
cat tranquilizer.
you know, and I'm like, well, okay, yeah, but no one bats an eye at alcohol, right? Like
Mhm.
you can start drinking at in Portland, you can start drinking anytime as long as it's not after like 2, 3 a.m. Then there's nothing for you. But um, it was so normal to go get like breakfast booze and
Oh, and in
lunch
Wisconsin, yeah,
booze
in
and
Wisconsin
dinner
too.
booze,
So
and but no one bats an eye at that. But
yeah.
you mentioned these other things, and they're like,
That sounds dangerous.
yeah. And psychedelics, they do get a bad name because of like all the everything from the Merry Pranksters, Tim Leary, the
Mhm.
war on drugs, the oh my gosh, our children are saying that they don't want to go to Vietnam and fight in some stupid war conflict. They want to go
Mhm.
to school and make things and be creative. And I think that the data's always been out there. We're just finally getting to a point where we're utilizing these tools. And I do think that drugs are tools.
Mhm.
And the Army's been using ketamine in the field for
Oh,
years.
they've been our government are the best drug dealers. They have the best drug.
Amen.
They
That's why
have
they don't want to legalize and get it out
mhm.
in the dispensaries for people, because then they'd have to give out all their drugs for free for, for safety
Mhm.
measures and harm reduction. But, like you go into the field, you get shot, they'll give you ketamine because it's a dissociative. It's not that
Mhm.
you're not in pain.
Yep.
It's like you're not panicking, you're not going to shock because of
Yeah.
pain. And the way it works is it breaks those neural pathways in your brain.
Mhm.
It literally undoes those connections. And everybody's like, well, then aren't you just stupid? And I'm like, no, your brain's constantly building new neural pathways. You can make new habits. It's hella hard. And for
Mhm.
people with like severe depressive disorders and things, and all these,
PTSD and
and a lot of these are dual diagnoses, or,
the
who goes to the therapist
compound. Yeah,
to
yeah.
find out anyway. And doctors aren't necessarily therapists that are able to dual diagnose and manage multiple things at once. So oftentimes you'll see people that are ADD on one thing, like Adderall, and or you have high anxiety, you'll be on Xannies. It's like
Mhm.
there's usually something else going on. It's not a wraparound holistic method. That's why
Yeah.
these things don't really fix issues. So in Oregon, they're doing these ketamine sessions where it's either a nasal spray or a drip or something. You'll go
Mhm.
in with a therapist and stuff, and it's kind of like the whole set and setting thing. They lay you down, you have a blanket, listen to your music, whatever, and you'll either have therapy right after or like the next day.
Mhm.
And it's a few sessions, and then it's having life changing events. And for a lot of people, I understand the hesitancy,
Mhm.
but imagine if you've always had a 50-pound weight on your back, and that's your daily anxiety and the inability to have high executive function.
Mhm.
And you're able to take a few little hits, and then all of a sudden, that weight's immediately lifted. And when I did ketamine, that was the first thing I noticed. And I was always so cautious because I've seen people in K-holes and I'm like, are you
Yep.
lost? Are
Yep.
you okay? And people are like, just make sure you got some Coke on you so you can get out of that. And I'm like,
Also, yep.
"Mm." And I'm always like, I'm the mom. I'm like, okay, guys, thermogenics, and you don't really want to do alcohol or take Tylenol because you're thinning your blood, and like
Yeah.
you don't want to like accidentally kill yourself, like
Mhm.
because harm reduction, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. Yep.
and so I'm like, well, what? Imagine if you were actually able to, and I am in therapy and have been for years, like
Mhm.
to
And
do
you
these
just
drugs.
started the ketamine therapy?
Oh, I haven't done ketamine therapy, like, officially.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Not in, like, the official capacity, but
I
you tried it and
this last year, 3 rounds of making sure my therapy was lining up right after, doing some ketamine, some really good ketamine, and it is crazy how productive you're able to be. Those things that, in my life can overwhelm and hinder, because I am non-medicated. I am ADD.
Mhm.
I have PTSD. I got other things going on, and I'm neurodivergent,
Mhm.
and it's a lot of work.
It's e every day. It's so much work, and it is every day. It's like, okay, it's like, how am I gonna be today? And, like, you could be fine when you go to bed, and then you wake up and be a completely different person. Like, I realized, like, I just came out of, like, this 3-year depression, and I realized, what had kicked it was, I finally decided to take some antidepressants. I've always been very antidepressant because I never wanted to be reliant on them, kind of thing, and that was always my thing. But I've tried them on and off, but they've always made me more suicidal and
Yes.
more depressed. Like every time I've taken them, and this time with my therapist, she's like, "You gotta try for longer, like 2 months." Tried it for 2 months, um, and like I didn't necessarily want to kill myself, but I was really thinking about like hurting other people, which was very weird to me because I was raised by a high functioning sociopath who allegedly used to kill people for money. So I was like, oh, is this in me too? Like, am I able to hurt other people and be okay with it? Granted, I was watching all 377 episodes of Criminal Minds as well. All of a sudden, I was like, I was my own meals and I was like, going to work out and like I'm being more productive. And it took me about a month to realize I'm like, holy shit, I'm not depressed anymore. I think that like when people like, cause I'm always in a depressive state, I think some people just have it in them, but I was like, I actually feel really good. So whatever the fucking Zoloft did, once I stopped taking it, it like flipped the switch. And then all of a sudden I was like, I feel amazing. Taking ketamine as a form of therapy, because I partied with it. I used to party with it when I was younger in my 20s and being a raver. I used to date a guy who he loved ketamine and I was really big on coke and meth at the time. So it was just a toxic relationship to begin with. He'd be in a K-hole and I'd be like, let's stay up for 3 days. Um, but I would see what it did and the couple of times I did it, I would, I excessively, like too much. But there was one time I remember we went to a party and like all I had was K. I'm like, I'm only gonna do a little bit. And we were just doing a little bit. And I do remember just like having like a very euphoric feeling and not being like in a K-hole or like it always made me feel like I was going to throw up if I did too much of it. And I didn't like, I've never been big on downers. But I remember, and then towards the end of the night when it started getting later and I've done a bunch, then I started getting in like down a little bit and started feeling sick. But I was like, oh, like I can see how ketamine can help, especially in therapy. Like it's the same thing with like mushrooms. I like to take I like to microdose on mushrooms. I also think that helped with my depression. Um because that helps like not just doing it to get fucked up basically, which is how I normally do all of my drugs, but this I was like I'm going to sit down and I'm going to microdose on some mushrooms and I'm going to write for an hour and see what comes out, and I know that you just get it all out and it does help. It does help tremendously. It really does. I also have ADHD and I like my Adderall. It does help with focusing. I try not to take it every day because that's another thing. Like I don't want to have to be reliant on it. So that's always my deal, is to make sure I regulate and don't get too reliant on things.
I'm a big believer in like cycling things, everything from caffeine.
Mhm.
And again, like I tell people all the time, like I am in recovery. I am a recovering alcoholic for sure.
Mhm.
People are like, but wait, I've drank with you before, and I'm like, yeah, socially. And for me, and again, I say it again, harm reduction, harm reduction, harm reduction. You educate people. You don't penalize them and stigmatize them. You don't discourage the sharing of information.
Yeah.
If people are afraid to say, like, I've dealt with this too,
Mhm.
and it's hard being a performer, a dancer, and all that to find places, venues that host dry events.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like if the community's not going to change, and I'm active in the queer community in Portland, and like I go to like all these clothing optional dance parties I'd be working or dancing at, or hosting things and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's just a part of our life, sex, drugs, and all
Rock and
that. And
roll, yeah.
especially if you get a bunch of queer babies together, it's like somebody's flipping, somebody's rolling, somebody's doing something, or
We
we're
got some
drinking.
GHB
And
over here, yeah.
and I have a lot of talks about consent, especially being a sex worker. Like
Mhm.
you consent is sober. Like it has to be, because I
Mhm.
mean ultimately, and it's people are like, oh, don't say that, and I'm like, but for real, like if y'all are having sex, like it should be consensual. And if you're high or drunk, you're not consenting, you're not able. You might think you have those agencies, but it's you might feel different later.
Yeah.
And that so for me, I've always come from the whole recovery is knowing that I have something that I deal with. I have this thing that can be a crutch, or it can be a hurdle I have to overcome. And I one time when I lost somebody that was very important to me, like I drank for over a year. And
Mhm.
I swear I gained all my weight, and people were like, "Oh, I just thought you knew you were getting bigger." And I'm like, "Yeah," like, and driving home drunk, like
Mhm.
all, and I told my friends at the time, I was like, y'all would let me drive us drunk. And I get out of every time I got pulled over or something, talk my way out of it, never all those issues. But it's like,
Mhm.
how many fucking times, like, and ultimately it came down to my friends were dealing with their own addictions. And,
Yeah.
so I knew that in my life, I'm never going to be away from alcohol, that I have to learn how to live with it.
Mhm.
And,
Have, like, a better relationship with it.
exactly, and my body actually can't handle drinking the way it used to.
Mine either.
It's like my doctors told me a few times. They're like, if you keep doing this, one of these days you're going to have a real bad. And I'm like, okay, I understand. So like I put it way off, and I only drink occasionally.
Mhm.
And but even and then, like I worked in the brewing industry, and I'd be out with clients, and you're expected to drink
Drink.
and this and that, and you are, and being just like in that industry that's primarily cishet men,
Mhm.
I was very much aware of, well, if I get a little too tipsy or any of that, like it's not okay. And I don't know. I think with like ketamine, and any of these drugs, like I used to do 7 grams of
Mhm.
mushrooms. Like that was normal. Like we were psychedelic warriors, whatever, let's do it.
Yep.
We got like LSA one time in a little Banaka bottle, and we dropped some, and they're like, oh, only take a couple hits because it's really strong. And me and my buddy, about an hour in, we're like, it's not working. squirt, squirt. We call it the Banaka incident, but yeah, we were gone for a minute. It was a long time, and we did the whole bottle. And I was at in Florida at Disney World, and my girlfriend had brought me some albino penis envy mushrooms,
Okay.
and it was only like a gram. I was like, oh, and they were like chocolates. I was like, okay, it was about a gram. Cool.
Mhm.
Those things, I wanted off the ride. Like in like an hour, I wanted off the ride. I had to leave Disneyland or Disney World. I was like, this is not okay. And so it is funny because I've moved to cycling things so that they're more effective for me. And
Mhm.
like, I don't always have caffeine. I'll go like 2 weeks without it, but I'll use Yohimbe supplements,
Mhm.
which is similar. It does the same thing, but it moves through different
Parts
ways
of your
in your
brain.
body and it's
Mhm.
processed different. And I think like those kind of tools or just places like Arrowwood where you can like research things or when you go to places and they have test strips, especially with all the fentanyl now that's out there
Yeah.
and everything, pressed addies with fentanyl and all these things
Which
like
is insane.
it is and it's symptomatic of the environment we're in.
Yeah, I agree
um
100%.
just like we always say, like cartels can be dealt with and these, things can be dealt with. Well, yeah. And a big part of it is the community attitude has to change. They have to become more informed and they have
Mhm.
to actually understand because we have a culture that for the last 150 years has stigmatized and marginalized, like to further marginalize communities of people of color, poor immigrants,
Mhm.
and again, especially poor communities rather than actually accept the fact that like it's just like abuse. It does
Mhm.
not know a social class.
No, yeah, yeah,
Addiction.
yeah. There's no different than the white lawyer, up in the rich house who like has to, doing lines constantly compared to, the inner city kid who's like smoking crack. There's no difference in the
No.
addiction, but the difference is how they're treated. Like the white person will get a slap on the wrist, everything will be fine. Where the black kid will end up going to the system and then they're stuck there. It's like once they're in that system, it's really hard to get out of that cycle. I've noticed. I have a couple of friends who are, ex-cons and stuff, and it takes a lot to really just rebuild their lives and try not to be, just seen as an ex-con.
And that stigmatization of drug use
Mhm.
impacts the whole community, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
And I just like, for example, when I was working needle exchanges, I would hear from people coming in that, they wanted to get on like prep Truvada, whatever. Or, they were positive and they wanted to get treatment finally. And these doctors, not necessarily the ones in the clinic, but these rural doctors, and I've seen it in cities too,
Mhm.
would say, well, if you're still using, then this is not a good idea for you. And I'm
Mhm.
like, why? Because you think that, because the whole point about medicine, and if you read the labels, they're always like, when they prescribe you something, your
Mhm.
doctor is prescribing this because the risk, the benefits outweigh the risk.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, HIV in the community. If you can, if you are willing to tell them, like, let's work, like, you don't think a junkie's gonna fucking wake up and do the thing, right? Like, it's always that
Mhm.
attitude, oh, you're just addicted. You're not gonna take your
Yeah.
pills on time. Well, how about you give them a real thing that they can work with? Like, hey, when you wake up and you start using, take your pill and just
Yeah.
write it down, like, and not get a schedule, but write down when you did this. And let them know that, like, yeah, there may be risks, but the risks are minimal compared to transmission in the community.
Mhm.
It's so ridiculous that people trying to get these medicines that are going to save their life and prevent other people from having to deal with that
Mhm.
in the medical community. Still to this day, there are doctors that will, if you admit that you use,
Won't give you the meds that
well,
you
won't give you
need.
access to the medicine you need to keep the whole community safe. Because if you think that only a certain type of people has sex, like, all that stigmatization, like, yeah, HIV's everywhere, and it's in all the communities because we're all sipping from the same fucking pool water, essentially. Like,
Yep.
we're all coming to the same fountain.
6
There's,
degrees of Kevin Bacon.
exactly. And what do we deal with there? It's from the grid epidemic. Like, it's having to fight the campaigns that damaged and stigmatized forever these communities. even
Mhm.
all these years later.
Yeah.
And and so I just go with that when people are talking about like, well, I don't want needle exchanges, or I don't think that we should decriminalize or legalize or all these things. I'm like, well, then I don't know what to tell you. You really don't
Yeah.
have a real grasp on how life is
Well, a
because
lot of it has to do like they're afraid. I feel that a lot of people are afraid of, that kind of
oh
stuff. And people are always afraid of stuff that they don't know. And like we have access to the internet, like they would rather play on Twitter than, actually do some real research and look up how this stuff can be beneficial. Like look at the other countries that, have like legalization or decriminalization. I mean, New York, we have our first needle exchange here, and I've had it's very 50-50 right now how people feel about it, but a lot of people, one of my buddies, he's a former heroin addict. He's like, I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing. I think that it's a good thing. I think that it can help, and I think that destigmatizing just drug use in general, like it's very
yeah.
similar to sex work. Like OnlyFans have definitely, helped destigmatize, for the most part. Still always going to be called a whore, but I own it. But it is, but it does, and I do feel I agree with you that it is going to take it'll probably take a really long time. But I think the more people that educate themselves on it, and the more that you just kind of have to force it on people. Basically, it's like, hey, this is the thing that's happening, and you're either going to be on board or you could just hate it and protest it later.
It is insane how people will let fear and the things that they're not comfortable with dictate how they think everybody else should be.
Yeah.
And it's we got to mitigate harm. In my opinion, what is it to you if we're giving out clean needles, free, tests and access to healthcare and resources that are not being met in the community?
Hmm.
But, like, what is it to you at the end of the day? You think it's some burden on you.
Hmm.
I remember the thought was that if we had needle exchanges, it was going to mean we were gonna have more people strung out on the streets.
Yeah.
Or if we decriminalize, like if pot was made legal, right? When Colorado was the only state that had legal marijuana, if pot was made legal, it
Hmm.
meant that, all the other, it was the gateway drug, right? Like we're going to have
Yeah.
everybody smoking meth by the
Uh,
end of the year.
yeah, everyone's going to be stoned. All our children are going to be stoned. But if you look at the countries that have like weed that's legalized, like like they don't give a fuck because it's legal. Like I want to do stuff that I'm not supposed to do. If drugs are illegal, I'm gonna want to do them more because I'm not supposed to do them. That's the
Well,
American way.
exactly. And like in other communities, you always do have those outliers. In every
Mhm.
culture, you'd have those people, and some cultures even called them soothsayers, medicine women,
Mhm.
shamans.
Shamans.
Like there was a place like Maria Sabina and the mushrooms in Mexico. These are medicines. And
Yeah.
every mammal, I would argue that it's part of being mammalian. Every
Mhm.
mammal gets high, gets
Yeah.
drunk. Like hark back to the Stone Ape theory with Terence
Yep.
McKenna and the McKenna brothers, but like it is part of being alive that we want to occasionally escape or elevate or change our reality.
Mhm.
And if you run more than like a mile, if you do long distance running, I'm telling you, you're crazy. I've done halves and marathons back in the day. And let me tell you, you hit 10 miles, you're high. You're high.
Right.
And and I've been in church. I grew up. I was a believer twice. That's how gullible I am. But like, praying and just being in the middle of like all that energy, you get high. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
going to concerts, even if like everybody there is on an energy vibe, and that is
Mhm.
a head change. And if you can understand that everybody is using in some aspect, that we just want to reduce the harm and save people's lives or give them tools that they can make better educated decisions for themselves and those around us.
And be able to do safer drugs as well. I think that's like I made two of my drug dealers buy the fentanyl strips.
It is
I'm like,
insane.
I'm like, you guys need this because a couple of my friends have died and stuff. I was just like, yo, I also learned to never do cocaine with LA comedians, but bad joke.
Whew.
Uh,
Oh, oh.
but yeah,
cocaine is one hell of a drug.
it's my favorite. It's my all-time favorite. So I try to stay away from it as much as humanly possible. It's kind of hard in New York, and even though it's fucking shit. But yeah, I do get caught into it every once in a while. I've actually been clean from it, well, since New Year's. I guess I did some on New Year's. So for a couple of weeks, but I always keep track of like when's the last time I did it. Is it okay? Because I'll get stuck doing it every day like I used to, just little bumps there, just it's like, oh, Adderall helps with me not doing cocaine though, which is
I had to get off the Adderall because like it is a stimulant, right?
nice.
Like
Yeah.
I've been on stimulants most of my life.
Mhm.
And because I got medicated very young and learning to live without those things. And I'm not an abstinence person if you haven't gotten it. And
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Roxo and I do cocaine. But like but it's a lot of people don't know that about me because
Mhm.
I've watched high functioning people like engineers in Silicon Valley who are meth heads,
Yeah.
but they work these
Woo!
crazy jobs and they're productive and they're family people and they have high functioning lives.
Mhm.
I've watched alcoholics from male, female, all across the gender spectrum. Somebody's hitting that bottle and they
Yep.
still go to work. They don't spend all their money at the bars and as a sex worker, I've taken money from people and I've had to cut people off when I'm like, you are impulsively spending money I know you do not have. And
Yeah.
that's just my model in general. Like
I've done that too.
because I can't. I'm not that human. I want
Yeah,
people
like, I
to
feel bad, like, I have that moral compass where it's just like, there was this lawyer and he had 3 kids and he just loved cocaine, and I was just like, "Yo, like, I'm a whore, but I have some morals," and I'm like, "You gotta no more, dude, we can't, like, you're spending," like, I love it, it's great, but yeah, like, I also believe in karma, so I'm just like, this is, and especially when like, if you know that someone is that fucked up and doesn't have that and you go and do it anyway, I always feel karma will get them sooner or later.
I don't judge people when they're doing survival work.
Yeah.
But if you're taking people's money so you can like live beyond your means, not budget, have
Yeah.
that thing that you really want because this is an easy hit. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I do judge that. I don't believe in hierarchy,
Yeah.
but I do judge that.
Yeah.
So, and I've had to, and I have in my
Mhm.
disclaimers when I book sessions, or even with my friends, if like I end up with friends because I am on this mission to get people to like fucking do little bumps, itty bitty bumps. Don't do a K hole. Like, let me just do this for you. Do itty bitty bumps, and like
Yeah.
let's talk about how you feel, and
Mhm.
like to really just change the way people have that relationship with the things that they use in their lives. Even
Mhm.
social media, like I tell people
That
all the
is
time,
your
I'm like, look,
drug.
girl, you're on yourself too hard. Put that shit down.
Down. Put it
And
down. I
and
have
we don't
a
realize
alarm
it.
2 hours. I'm allowed 2 hours because I also like, I do a lot of promoting and stuff, but it's like, because you'll get stuck. Also, you're just scrolling and 3 hours went by and you're like, "What the fuck am I doing with my life?" I'm like, "It's fucking Twitter, Jesus Christ." It's so
Yeah.
like, I have a worse addiction with social media than I do with cocaine, 120%. Like, absolutely, yeah, I have to have that timer on. I always make sure I have, like, I pre-plan my tweets and promotions so that way they're there. And when I scroll, I make sure I like the people's tweets or fucking Instagram posts, and then I'm done. And then put it down, get it out of my fucking face.
Oh my gosh. No, I feel that. And at the end of the day, you're one person. We've not all been in this, like we've never been in this point in time as humans before.
Yeah.
And I don't think that abstinence or that like cancel drug culture, like
Mhm.
I don't think that that's going to work. A lot of it is definitely going to be education. And
Mhm.
I've been telling people, in Oregon, we can buy Narcan. We can go to the pharmacist and get a prescription for Narcan. And people are like, "Well, you don't use." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know I don't use those drugs, but it's like I know how to do CPR.
Same. Yeah.
If I had to perform CPR on a stranger, I would in a life-saving moment. Like, why wouldn't I carry Narcan if I can get it, have it, and save a life? Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what that life is and what they're doing with that life. I'm not the
Yeah.
person that judges that, like, and nor should
Mhm.
anybody else.
Yeah.
It's that, what if they didn't know? What if it was an accident? Like, there's so many things. I've lost people because, just not knowing what was in their drugs, or, they go clean for a bit, they get out of rehab, they come back and they're like putting out their same fucking,
Yeah.
or like when you don't party but every like few months, and then all of a sudden you're like trying to do these really big lines. I'm like, so when's the last time you did what? And I always
Yeah.
remind people, I'm like, the lethal dose is 6 grams or
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe you only get two if you think you're gonna do the whole thing in a
Yeah, but
bender.
that's how like an addict's brains work. It's like, oh, I used to be able to do this much. Like I used to be able to drink a bottle of vodka a night and like drive home and be fine. My buddy Laney knows him as well. Like he had died from Xanax, from taking too much Xanax. Like he was clean and then he used again and he tried doing the exact same amount that he used to and his body couldn't handle it. Like now I can have 2 glasses of wine and be hammered. Like I cannot drink the same. It's like over quarantine, I was pretty good at drinking. Again, drinking at home like a true alcoholic. And then yeah, after a little while, it took me a while to like get acclimated back into society and stuff. But yeah, now I'm back to like 1.5 beers at a show, and I'm like, oh, I'm done. I'm like, yes, thank you, because
And
I
that's
don't.
huge recovery right there. Like, you
Yeah.
are aware of the things that
Hmm.
can change your life in the ways that maybe you don't want, or the things that you use as a crutch, and
Yeah.
just doing better than the day before, and keeping your blind spots apparent, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Always
knowing
looking
they're
over them.
there, and and I think that's the best thing that we can do, and also normalize talking about it, because the only way we're
Yeah.
gonna save people is if we talk about it. Like, and I take every opportunity I can. And I was on psych meds for years and all these
Mhm.
things like mood stabilizers,
Mhm.
sleeping aids. And as a
Yeah.
person with periods, my birth control was always a fucking bitch. And
Yeah.
I was not present. I mean, I have an emergency Zammy that I keep
Yeah.
in case. But like last time
I
I had to
really
take a
like beta
Xanax.
blockers. I have beta blockers for my anxiety because I also have Xanax and I hate like I'm not a big fan of
Yeah.
Xanax at all. Like the most of the time I do the Xanax is if I done too much coke and I need to go to sleep. That's what I use fucking Xanax for. Uh which is not what you should be using fucking Xanax for. But I've noticed I really because they're not a narcotic and
Mhm.
they actually like work. Like when I take Xanax, like I still have that anxiety. It's like my brain slow down, not my heart. And
Yeah.
the propanol or whatever that actually like that calms my heart down, and that's what I need to be calm. And so that yeah, I rather take my beta blockers than fucking Xanax. Highly recommend
I'll have to
it.
try that, because
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
great
like, you
recommendation.
don't get fucked up, all of a sudden you're just like, "Oh, I'm calm again," and, like, they use it, it's like a stage fright drug, like, you get it'd be like the
Yeah.
stage fright drug, when I first started comedy, like, for the first couple, like, really big shows that I had, my doctor's like, "Oh, here, try this," and I was like, "Oh my god," my performances just were so much better because of it, but yeah, now I just take it if I have, like, a little, like, anxiety or a panic attack, I've noticed that, yeah, they work phenomenal for that. So that's what I like.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Especially if you don't like Xanax. Yeah, try the beta blockers. Well, it's been fucking phenomenal having you on. You're so smart. You have so much information. Very informative. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is what this podcast is about, is to help like bring out, tell people stories and get it out there more and talking about drugs. I have more people from all walks of life, talk about their issues with drugs, how they got clean, how they still like to use recovery, harm reduction, and all of that stuff. So you're a perfect guest.
I appreciate it. I'm
Where can
really excited to
Yeah.
like be out in New York in a couple weeks too.
Oh, let me
I'll make
know.
notes. You said the cocaine sucks in New
Yeah,
York.
yeah, yeah. Not, I mean, I have a couple good dealers. If you really do, I could help you out with that. Yeah, anything. Yeah, let me know. I'll bring you to a show or something like that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I always love listening to you, and like
Oh,
the
thank
things that
you.
you're doing. And comedy is like, that's where all the real hard workers go to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Where can people find you on social media?
Oh yeah, definitely. Thebabewest.com has all my links. And then you can always find me at The Babe West on Twitter and Instagram, and babewestxxx.com if you want to go hit up my free site while it's still free.
Well, it's still free. Well, yeah, let me know when you come to New York. I would love to meet you in person.
I'll be out there for Valentine's Day.
Ooh, nice. Very
Mm.
nice. I'll be
Well,
there
thank you
too.
so much again. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Obviously you can find me, the Aaliyah Janine on Twitter, Aaliyah.Janine on Instagram. You can find this wonderful podcast also on social media. How to Do Drugs Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Please rate and subscribe to this awesome podcast. I don't ask for it enough, which is why I probably don't have any. But you can listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify. I just added it to iHeartRadio for any of you iHeartRadio listeners. And also YouTube if you would like to see how I look without makeup on, or not. That's fine. I don't mind. Probably better, honestly. And all right, that's it. Bye.